welcome to Pecan Corner. I'm Tina, and today I'm going to make yeast bread out of barley flour. Okie doke, here we go. We've been talking about Paul having diabetes and finding new ways to cook. Of course, he was already eating a keto, a low-carb diet, and so that the change for him has not been as big as it might have been for some people. But one of the things that we've discovered is that he can eat barley without it affecting his blood sugar. And so I'm going to try making a barley yeast bread, and I'm not going to use any wheat flour in it. Most barley risen breads, if they use yeast, they usually mix in some wheat flour, but we found that wheat flour really causes his blood sugar to go way up. I am going to add a little dab of wheat gluten because barley doesn't have a whole lot of gluten in it, and so I'm just going to supplement that, because normally when I make a yeast bread I add some gluten even with wheat flour, just to help the rise. The other thing is, I was reading up on the sugar. I was trying to figure out what to substitute, if I needed to substitute the sugar that is often called for in yeast breads. And I've always heard that yeast needs that sugar for food, and that's why you have to put sugar in a yeast bread. And come to find out that wasn't true. On King Arthur's flour site, it says that in yeast bread, the lower the amount of sugar, the stronger the loaf will rise. So in fact, the more the yeast will work, and they'll give off those gases that cause it to rise. It actually says that what sugar does is help keep the loaf moist, and it helps preserve the bread longer, so it won't dry out quite as fast. So a loaf made without any sugar will dry out faster, so we'll have to use it up faster, and need to be aware of that. But it's really interesting that sugar actually slows down the rise and keeps the yeast from being as active and from working as hard. And so I thought that was interesting. The other thing sugar does is it enhances browning. So we'll try this. I can always brush a little egg yolk on the top of it to help it brown more if I don't like the rise. But for this first batch, I may or may not use some. I'm going to make two different loaves and bake it two different ways, and I might try that on one of them just to see what happens. So I thought that was really interesting. So you can, if you can't find a recipe that, if you bake and you need to leave out sugar and you can't find a recipe that doesn't have it in there, find one that just calls for a couple of tablespoons of sugar, and then just leave it out. It's not going to hurt anything. So let me get my my mixing bowl over here. Alrighty, now I've lined my pans with greased parchment with barley bread. I think you need to use parchment for it. It's all the recipes that I've seen for it sounds like it must stick pretty badly. So I'm going to start out with 4 cups of flour. I've got my water warming over here on the stove. I'll actually start with 3 cups, and then I'll add the 4th one as I need to. And I know a lot of bakers use go by weight and try to be really precise, and I'm just not that kind of a cook. So I will measure things for my baking, but I'm not going to. Okay, that was 3 cups. It's still in that bag. Now then, I'm going to add a couple of tablespoons of gluten. Normally in my regular loaf for this, I'd add 8 tablespoons, but I don't want that much wheat in here, so I don't want it to interfere with Paul's blood sugar. So I'm just going to add a couple of tablespoons just to give me a little extra gluten. This wheat gluten is the same thing that, you know, bread flour. When you buy bread flour, it has a higher gluten content. Gluten is protein, really. It's wheat protein. 21 grams of protein in a quarter cup of this, and only 6 grams of carbs. So you're not adding a whole lot, and a quarter cup is 4 tablespoons, so I've added 1/8 of a cup. So I've added 10.5 grams of protein and only 3 grams of carbs to all of both of my loaves together. So that's pretty good. Now then, let's see. Let's add our salt. Want two teaspoons of salt. Like my little salt container. It's a beautiful antique coffee cup or teacup. The handle's broken on it, but hey, it works great to keep salt in on my counter here. So there's, you know, $2 or $1, however much it was. It's always worthwhile. I'm going to omit the honey. And I'm not going to add any oil until I'm adding my water. I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of yeast, and I've got a new container of yeast here because I haven't baked yeast bread in a long time. So I'm using a lot of yeast because there's about 1 3/4 tablespoons of yeast per packet, but 2 tablespoons of yeast will equal 1 packet of yeast if you're making this with just the packets. All right, now I'm going to move over here. Let me get my oil weighed out, measured out. I want 2 tablespoons of oil, which is half of a quarter cup, and I'm using olive oil. And I don't buy different grades of olive oil. I just buy extra virgin, but I wait until it's on sale and then I buy it. So, and I don't use it like, you know, in 3 cups at a time. So it's easier that way for me. I don't notice that much difference in the price. All right, let's see here. I've got everything. I've got my gluten in, I've got my salt and my yeast and my flour. Now, I'm going to take my other flour over here to my stand mixer, and I'm going to take my oil over there, and how's my water doing? Let my water heat just a little dab more. I want it just slightly warmer than body temperature, about 110. So by the time I move my camera, it should be warm enough, so I'll be right there. Okay, get another light on. There we go. Have a little more light. I bought these great. This is called an appliance rolling tray. Oh, isn't that awesome? It's got wheels on it. You just press down on this and pull, and the whole thing just pulls out. Paul saw these back in the fall in Aldi's ad, and he said, when you go to Aldi's, be sure and get one of these. And I saw them, and I thought, oh gosh, that's an awful lot of money, and they're probably made out of plastic, but he had asked me to buy it, so I spent the $10 and I bought one. Well, when I came home and took it out and discovered it was an all metal one, and discovered how great it was, for me to not have to be dragging my stand mixer or the coffee pot out from under the counter all the time, I went back the next day, and I not only bought us a second one, I bought one for everybody on my Christmas gift list. So it's a good thing, and it's called an appliance rolling tray if you want to look for them. It was one of those special purchases that they have. So, all right, now then, I'm going to add my water in. This is 2 cups of water that I've warmed up. When I make yeast bread, I mix in my yeast with the flour, with the dry ingredients, and I'll talk about that again in just a minute. All right, now I'm going to turn it on real slow. I'm using my dough hook in here, and I'm going to turn it on slow until it's mixed nicely. Now let it turn it a little bit higher. Turn it off for a second. Let me get me a spatula. go. Okay. Work the flour off the sides of the bowl here. Get it into the mix. There we go. All right, now. Now we can go faster. The other thing I've found with barley that I've worked with so far is that it will take in a lot of moisture. So you kind of have to play it by ear when you're converting a recipe from wheat flour to barley flour. You have to play it by ear, and you have to give it a minute or two to rest and kind of absorb that moisture so that you can see what it's going to do. Now then, all right, now I'm going to add some more flour. I'm going to add a half a cup here. There we go. And with any bread or any flour that you're using, you're always going to have to adjust your flour because it depends on the humidity. Humidity in the flour itself, really, and in the room that you're in. But the flours, they absorb different amounts of moisture depending on where we've got them stored and what it's like in our area. Years ago, my grandmother took a bread baking class that the Seventh-day Adventists offered, and their method included just mixing the dry yeast in with the dry ingredients. And so you didn't have all of this having to mix the yeast separately with water and sugar and waiting for it to proof and all that kind of thing. They also, over the years, I've found some other methods that I like that also shorten the process, which is to only use one rise. Years ago, I wanted to bake bread, and I just didn't have the time. I didn't have time to mix it up and then let it rise for hours and punch it down and put it in a pan and let it rise again before I baked it. So I finally decided I was going to learn how to bake bread one year. And I just got determined, and that weekend I did nothing but bake bread, and I'd bake a loaf and I'd throw it away because it would be inedible, and I'd bake another one, and I just kept that up until I finally came up with a recipe and method that worked well for me, that didn't require a double rise. And so this is just kind of, I tend to use use recipes that don't call for making a sponge. Or now the pizza dough recipe, which Paul found, it does require a long slow rise. You do it and let it sit all day, or you can even do it overnight. So some kinds of breads need that, but the ones that I do tend to be something that I can bake really fast. Okay, let's see how we're going here. It's still pretty soupy looking, so let's see. I'm going to add in another half cup of barley flour. I don't want to get it too dry because remember what I said about the the sugar? According to the King Arthur flour site, it said that bread will be drier if you don't have any sugar in it. So I want to be careful that I do have some moisture in here. You know, that makes sense because when you're measuring ingredients for anything that uses sugar in it, you count sugar as a liquid rather than as a dry ingredient. So it's what do they call it? Hygroscopic, meaning sugar attracts moisture. Sugar also melts, and that's why it's considered a liquid in recipes. Okay. And of course, this mixing with my dough hook on is the equivalent of kneading it. I'm not going to have to knead my dough. I'm just going to turn it out and just work it slightly, so I won't have to knead it with all this mixing with the dough hook. That's the other thing that's a savior. Paul's mother bought this KitchenAid mixer for him, and I had never really used one. I didn't know I would. And after he got sick and I started doing more things, I've discovered that I do appreciate it more, and I'm able to use it more. So, Thelma, thank you for buying this for us. It's one of the old ones, but it's still made in the U.S. and still has a real powerful motor. You need to be sure you get the most powerful motor you can get when you buy a KitchenAid. You don't, because that's what makes all the difference in what it can do. Let's see how we're doing here. Still sticky. We're going to need some more flour. Okay. Just 3/4 of a cup. So that's 4 3/4 cup that we've added now. And then after this, I'll put it on my counter over there and knead in the other. Okay, this is going to do it, I think. Let me show you what it looks like. There we go. See what it looks like in there? How that dough hook just works it in. Does a really nice job and saves us a lot of effort. This would be about 20 minutes worth of hand kneading to get this kind of work into it. Alright, I'm going to take it out and put it back on my board over here and work on it there. Okay, now then. Some barley flour out here. Use my scraper to scrape my dough off of my hook here. This recipe is making 2 loaves. I'm going to bake one of them in a loaf pan and one of them on a parchment covered sheet. Now then, I'm going to preheat my oven for just 1 minute. Setting my timer, so I'll only preheat it for 1 minute because I want it to rise in the oven for a little bit before I turn the oven on and start it cooking, start it baking. Get the rest of this out. It's a sticky dough. But I used the barley flour the other day to make a cream gravy with, and I also used it to coat fried chicken for the air fryer, and it worked fantastic. It thickens up just like regular flour, so you can make just regular gravy. Oh yeah, that works great. Yep, it's soft, but a bit. Okay, turn that off. There we go. All right, now then. All right, now let's cut it in half. Oh, it is sticky. See how it stuck to that? Yeah. Okay. Okay, we're going to put one of them into the loaf pan. Let me just shape it a little bit here. Put it in the loaf pan. This one, we're going to treat like a baguette. We're going to, oops. aside for a minute. Okay, put that aside. Now then, a little more flour here. I don't want it to stick. All right, now I'm gonna roll this. There we go. Yes, and now I'm just gonna twist that together. There we go. All right, now I'm gonna set that on a greased parchment there. Mash it together there. Okay. Now then, I'm gonna put these in the oven to rise. What I've had to do, fit them in my oven. I've got to put them both on this baking pan because it's pretty big, so I had to turn my parchment down there. There we go. All right, now then I'm going to let these rise for 45 minutes. All right. I'll see y'all in a little while. Okay, my timer's going off. Let's see how things look now. All right. This one's risen up a lot more. Now I'm gonna leave them right where they are, and I'm gonna turn the oven on and bake them. I'm gonna leave them in there while they preheat. And I'm gonna turn the oven on to 350, and I'm gonna bake them for I'm gonna try 30 minutes to start with. All right, there we go. Okay, the timer just now went off, and turn this up, and yep, sounds hollow. So we're going to let this rest about 5 or 10 minutes before I cut into it, and then we'll see what it looks like and what it tastes like. Okay, now the moment of truth. I put this one into the loaf pan because I was hoping it might rise a little higher, and it did. It's slightly higher than the other one. Let's take a look at. It's only cooled for about 10 minutes here, but it's got a nice looking texture. Now let me put some butter on it, and we'll give it a taste. Likes his butter to be melted on anything, so let me rub on this until I get it to melt. It looks really nice. I might brush the tops with oil next time because just to give it a better look, but it has a pretty color, and it smells fabulous. It smells just like yeast bread baking. You can really smell the yeast in it. Okay, now let me take a piece into Paul, and we'll see what he thinks. And the camera's on, Paul, so we'll get to hear you. Got it?
Not like your old bread.
It's good?
That's good though.
Yep.
Yep. Tastes fine.
Tastes fine? Okay. Has a good flavor. Paul says it tastes good.
Yeah, it does.
Yep. All right, so there we go. There is barley bread. So Paul can have some of this now. He won't eat half a loaf of it, but he'll be able to have some. I'll put some garlic butter on some and make it to go with Italian meals that we have, or slice it up and maybe try it as a sandwich bread. Probably more of a dinner bread, I think, than a sandwich bread. The texture We'll just have to see how it does.
That's
I want-
kind of thin too.
I'm going to let the loaf cool completely before I cut into it.
Tastes good though.
And then we'll see how it does. All right, thank you all for stopping by. I appreciate you. Talk to you again soon.